Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News Chief Political Anchor Bret Baier.
Steve, thanks for doing this. So this project is the Case for America. And, as we get ready for the 250th, talking to various people about making the case for America and their kind of story. As the country hopefully comes together before that moment in 26. So your story, you grew up in Hawaii before leaving for college on the mainland. What do you remember as your idea of the American dream growing up?
Well, it's kind of funny. When I was born, Hawaii was not yet a state. It became a state on my first birthday, so it was still a territory. Which is kind of interesting. The 50th state basically emerged back then in the late 50s. And so obviously when I was young, but as I got a little bit older, it was just, America was about possibility, sort of this pioneering spirit, this sense of possibility, which when you're on an island like in Hawaii, you get a sense you're part of some broader agenda, broader purpose. And also some of the ideas of freedom. Of course, was where I was born, not too far from Pearl Harbor, just a few minutes away. I kind of quickly learned about that story and the central role Hawaii played in that war. And lastly, I'd say it was apparent to me pretty early on, even watching some things on television, that America was about innovation. It's a pioneering spirit that's helped get America started 250 years ago and continues to kind of power us now as we're a country that sort of uniquely kind of leans into the future. So, the Hawaii roots, I think, kind of were informed a lot of that, particularly because it was the last state to be added and because it was more remote. We were kind of watching, from Hawaii, the rest of the country.
Speaking of that pioneering spirit, you were a pioneer of technologies we all rely on. It's hard to believe that our first connectivity through America Online was 1986. Didn't happen.
Yeah, a long time ago, 4 decades.
Yeah. The inspiration, you say, was to build community through connectivity. And you once said the killer app is community. What do you mean by that?
Well, when we got started, the idea of the internet was viewed by most as sort of fanciful, never really would happen, almost science fiction, futuristic. And the data was supportive of that skeptical, cynical argument. Only about 3% of people were connected when we got started. Those 3% were only using the internet about an hour a week when we got started. So we knew it was going to be a mountain to climb to get people to understand the power of the internet, get people to want to be connected, make it easier to use, more useful, more fun, more affordable. There are a lot of things we had to do. But one of the core issues was what was the core of the internet? What was almost the soul of the internet? And for us, it was people. It was the spirit of community. How do you create a service where people want to gather partly to get information or, find out what's happening and different things, but also to connect with people, both people they already knew, friends and family. This is a good way to stay in touch. And importantly, also people they didn't yet know. And because of their particular interests, whether it be in photography or travel or whatever it might be, they could connect with other people who had that shared interest. So that was our bet, that the killer app was people. We created all kinds of services that were around building that sense of community. When we were at our peak, about half of all the internet traffic on AOL was community-related features. And that community sense has evolved, obviously, over the last couple of decades to be more about social media, which has been a little bit of a mixed blessing. Some aspects I think have been positive, but also some aspects have been negative. And the idea, to me, of community was it brings us together. It connects people who don't necessarily have a shared perspective, and they would learn from each other. Sadly, as you well know, we have a little bit more of this dynamic now where people are kind of living in their own filter bubbles, just talking to people in their own tribe, not necessarily understanding the other side of things. And the algorithms have kind of made things even more complicated. So still believe in the internet, still believe in the power of community, still see the many, many benefits the internet has had in terms of transforming life in so many profound and important ways, but also a little bit of disappointment in terms of what's happened on the community side, particularly with social media these days.
Through your company, Rise of the Rest, you've devoted a lot of energy to investing in opportunity in places that are often neglected by investors. Midwest, the South, Southwest. What have you learned about American cities across the country that might surprise people?
There's a lot of great things happening all across the country, yet most of the venture capital that drives a lot of the innovation economy is just focused on investing in entrepreneurs in a few places. About 75% of venture capital goes to just 3 states, California, New York, and Massachusetts, which is crazy because the other 47 states have a lot of really smart people doing a lot of innovative things. And because so much capital is focused on the coast, a lot of the people in the middle of the country feel like they have to leave where they are, leave where they have friends and family, where they have a community, to go to a place like Silicon Valley. Otherwise, they're not going to have an opportunity to really participate and innovate. So I think it's really, sad and tragic that brain drain has hollowed out some of our communities, and some people feel more disconnected to, friends and family. But when we started Ride the Rest well over a decade ago, we said, talent is equally distributed. Opportunity is not. Let's do something about it. And so far, we've invested in over 200 companies in 100 different cities, nearly 40 states. And what we're seeing are great entrepreneurs building great companies that are transforming business, transforming society, and in the process, creating jobs and driving economic growth in cities all across the country, not just the coast. And hopefully we'll continue to see momentum and that, front. Some of these companies really are benefiting from being in these cities. And, this a couple weeks ago in Atlanta, for example, one of the companies we backed called Hermeus, spun out of Georgia Tech, some students there. They're working on a Mach 5 engine, supersonic, travel. Air Force is a big customer. And guess what? Atlanta is a great, hub in terms of aerospace. Georgia Tech is a great feeder. So that company has advantage from being in Atlanta as opposed to 10 or 20 years ago. People say, oh, that company can't succeed unless it's in Silicon Valley. We need to create more of an opportunity for these entrepreneurs all across the country, in the process, create more, jobs and economic growth, almost level the playing field so that people can choose where they want to live as opposed to feel like they have to move someplace to be, part of the action.
We'll continue right after this. Yeah, we talked about it when you came on the show, talking about your book. And
I remember that. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, explaining kind of what you were thinking. But through those activities, there's this sense of unity in a diverse country that has very different looks at the same things. Everybody kind of pulling together instead of against each other. Economic opportunity. I mean, explain how that possibly is a uniting or unifying factor in America.
Well, as you said, there's a lot of things, sadly, that divide us as a nation. But one of the things that really does unite us is this idea of leaning into the future, the idea of possibility, the idea of innovation, and specifically the idea of creating jobs and opportunity for people everywhere, not just in a few places. And so I saw this nearly 15 years ago when I was working on something called the Jobs Act, jumpstarting our Business Startups Act, which is trying to get capital to entrepreneurs in different ways, also work on opportunity zones. In all these cases, Republicans and Democrats came together to pass legislation in Congress, which doesn't happen all that much these days, to basically create more opportunity for entrepreneurs because of the role they play in these communities, again, all across the country, and driving economic growth and job creation. So it is important to look for examples where people do come together. Thankfully, when it's about jobs, when it's about innovation, when it's about entrepreneurship, there's broad support for that. And even as we've traveled around the country with our Rise the Rest, we've done bus tours to dozens and dozens and dozens of different cities. When you're on the bus with a mayor or a governor, you don't know if they're necessarily a Democrat or Republican. They're talking about what can they do to create a stronger innovation economy, a stronger entrepreneurial ecosystem, a stronger startup community. And everybody recognizes that's important for their community and also important for their country. So one of the nice things about focusing on this innovation entrepreneurship is you get to see the best of America, where people come together to really kind of lean into the future and try to power the future.
Yeah, economic success doesn't have a party. I mean, both sides are trying to.
Everybody agrees on that one. You got it, Bret.
Yeah. You also spent time as chairman of the Smithsonian, which obviously is preparing for the 250th American anniversary in 2026. Why do you think it's important for us as a country to really, grasp this moment at 250?
I think it's very important because 250 years is remarkable. Most people, when America got started, as you know, you've written a number of books on this, didn't really think America would be successful. Most people around the world were skeptical that this idea of America would ever take off. And 250 years later, not only did we survive, but we thrived. And now we're the leading economy in the world, the leader of the free world. And it wasn't by accident. It was a lot of hard work initially by the patriots that helped forge the republic, but then about the innovators, the pioneers who moved here, started things here, built things here, and America led the way in the whole agricultural revolution, then pivoted, led the way in the industrial revolution, then pivoted again and led the way in the technology, the digital revolution. And we need to continue to lead the way. We can't get cocky and complacent, because we're seeing competition from China and others that is really intensifying. If we're going to have another really successful 250 years, the next 250 years, we need to make sure we learn from what got us to now, and we come together to make sure that this country continues to be uniquely suited to innovate and pioneer and build not just new companies, but whole new industries. And so I think taking a step back because of the 250th and remembering what it was like before, remembering how we got to now, and thinking about how we learn from some of those lessons and apply them as we think about the future is very important. And on a personal level, it's also particularly exciting because I remember being in Washington, D.C. for the 200th. And that's actually when the Smithsonian opened the Air and Space Museum, and a lot of things were happening on the National Mall. And it was a time for people all across the country to come together. There were events in pretty much every city in the country. And people took a step back and said, wow, we made it to 200. What's going to happen next? I think there's a similar opportunity now that we're gearing up to celebrate the 250th in the Smithsonian with its 21 museums and also everything it does all across the country, not just in Washington, D.C., is a great platform to tell those stories, tell the unique American story, and remind us why we are unique and special, and how we can think about the future and make sure the next 250 years are as successful as the first 250 years.
Yeah, that's well said, and it is important. If you were asked to make the case for America, what would be your main argument?
Despite some of the challenges that we face, America is still the land of opportunity, the land of possibility, the land where people can grow up and maybe not start with much and have great success, a place that's a magnet for people from all around the world who want to be part of America, help build the next chapter of America. So we still have this pioneering spirit. We're still innovators and new technologies now with things like artificial intelligence. America is in the lead. How do we continue to lead? How do we continue to be that magnet for talent? How do we continue to inspire the next generation to think big, to think about possibility in a new kind of way? So I think America still is, despite again some challenges, some areas that we still need to focus and do a better job on, is a unique nation, a real unique land of opportunity, a land of possibility.
That's great, Steve. I really appreciate the time.
Thank you, Bret.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.